The sun in Copper Ridge didn't just shine, it punished. It beat down on the dust-choked trail like a hammer on an anvil, and 20-year-old Lara Whitfield felt every single blow. She pressed a hand to the rough wood of the wagon, trying to steady herself as it lurched through another rut. The town wasn't a town. It was a scar on the face of the prairie. Her cotton dress, meant for the civilized streets of Philadelphia, was plastered to her back with sweat. For 6 weeks, she had traveled, chasing a ghost. A dead uncle she'd never met. A piece of paper that said she now owned a trading post on the ragged edge of the world. It felt like a joke. A cruel, final prank from a family she barely knew. The wagon groaned to a halt. This was it. A building more ruin than business, its wood weathered black, a window boarded up like a blinded eye. This was her inheritance. She stepped down, and the dust rose to greet her, a fine red powder that tasted of grit and failure. A man emerged from the building next door, wiping his hands on a leather apron. His face was a roadmap of hard years. "You the Whitfield girl?" he asked. No greeting, no welcome. "I am Lara Whitfield," she said, her voice sounding thin and foreign. "I'm here to claim my uncle's property." The man spat a brown stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "Thomas Whitfield's been in the ground 3 months. Folks figured the place'd go to auction." He squinted at her. "This is Copper Ridge, miss. Out here, what matters is holding on to what's yours. Paper don't mean much when a man decides he wants what you got." Before she could answer, the sound of hoofbeats cut through the stifling air. 3 riders. They moved with an easy confidence that screamed ownership. The man in the center sat on his horse like it was a throne. He was maybe 30, with dark hair, and a face that would have been handsome, if not for the chilling emptiness in his gray eyes. A gun belt hung low on his hips, not for show, but for use. He pulled his horse to a stop right in front of her, looking down with an unreadable expression. "Miss Whitfield," he said, his voice laced with a cold amusement. "Welcome to Copper Ridge. I'm Hayes Dalton. I own pretty much everything else around here." Lara met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "Mr. Dalton?" "Sorry to hear about your uncle," he said, but his eyes told a different story. "Thomas and I had an understanding. I made him a very generous offer for this place." "Then I'm afraid you'll be disappointed," Lara said, her voice betraying none of the fear coiling in her stomach. "I have no intention of selling." Dalton's smile was a razor slash. "Perhaps you don't understand. Your uncle's trading post sits on a piece of land I need. It cuts straight through to the railhead. Without it, my cattle drives cost me a fortune. That sounds like your problem, Mr. Dalton, not mine." The youngest rider, a man with a cruel sneer, let out a sharp laugh. Dalton silenced him with a glance, his cold gray eyes never leaving Lara's. "I'm trying to be reasonable. This is harsh country. A woman alone. Challenges you can't imagine. I'm offering you an easy way out." "Thank you for your concern," she said, her words clipped and formal. "But I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." Something flickered in his eyes then, a switch being flipped. "I hope you'll reconsider," he said, and it sounded less like advice and more like a threat. "For your own sake." He tipped his hat in a gesture of pure mockery and wheeled his horse around. As they rode away, the old man in the apron shook his head. "You just made a powerful enemy, miss. Hayes Dalton ain't a man you cross." "He doesn't own this town," Lara shot back. "Near enough," the man muttered. "Near enough." Lara turned and faced her inheritance. It was broken and neglected, a testament to failure. But it was hers, and no one was going to take it from her. She didn't know it then, but her defiance hadn't just angered a local rancher. She had just stepped into the middle of a war that had started long before she'd arrived. A war over a secret buried deep beneath the floorboards of the trading post. A secret worth killing for. The inside of the trading post smelled of ghosts. Dust and old leather and the lingering scent of her uncle's lonely life. She found a broom and began to sweep. The simple work a balm for her frayed nerves. She was working, trying not to think about Hayes Dalton's cold eyes, when a woman appeared in the doorway. "I'm Margaret Hensley," the woman said. "Run the boarding house. Thought you might need a hand." Margaret's eyes were kind but cautious. She looked at Lara, then at the empty shelves, and seemed to understand everything. She told Lara who to trust in town and who would cheat her. And then she spoke about Hayes Dalton. "He came here 10 years ago with nothing but a gun and a hunger in his eyes," Margaret said, her voice low. "Built that ranch on hard work and harder methods. Some say he ran off the last owner. Others say the man just vanished." Margaret looked Lara straight in the eye. "Either way, Hayes got what he wanted. And now, he wants this." "He just wants a shortcut for his cattle," Lara said. Margaret's expression was grim. "No, dear, it's more than that. Your Uncle Thomas. He and Dalton were enemies, real enemies. Thomas refused to sell for years, said this land was special, that it had to be protected." A chill went down Lara's spine. Protected from what? He never said. But a month before he died, he told me he'd sent a letter to family back east. He said if anything happened to him, the letter would explain. He said the future of this whole valley depended on it. Lara's mind raced back to the curt letter she had received. It had seemed so simple, so straightforward. But now it felt like a map to a treasure she didn't understand, or a trigger for a trap. That night, she tore her trunks apart, searching for that letter, her heart pounding. She found it tucked into the lining of her travel case. It was just as she remembered. A few short lines about her inheritance. Nothing more. But Margaret's words echoed in her mind. A secret. A war. A future that depended on her. She felt a creeping dread. This wasn't about land. It was about something hidden. And Hayes Dalton wasn't just a rancher. He was a predator, circling something he believed was his, and she was standing right in his way. The next morning, Lara walked into the general store, determined to show the town she was here to stay. The proprietor, a weaselly man named Barnaby, gave her a smile that was all teeth. He sold her supplies at a price that was pure theft, but she paid it. She wouldn't show weakness. On her way back, she heard a commotion. A crowd had gathered. In the center, one of Dalton's men, the sneering one, Cutter, was dragging a young native girl by a rope tied around her wrists. The girl was maybe 17, her face bruised, blood trickling from her lip. "Found her stealing from the cookhouse," Cutter shouted to the crowd. "Mr. Dalton said to make an example." The townspeople just watched, their faces blank. This was frontier justice. Ugly, brutal, and none of their business. But Lara couldn't turn away. The girl stumbled, her eyes dark with pain and terror. And Lara heard herself say, "Wait!" The single word cut through the air. The crowd turned. Cutter's eyes narrowed into slits. "This ain't your concern, lady." "She needs a doctor, not a lesson," Lara said, her voice shaking but firm. Cutter laughed. "She needs to learn not to steal from Hayes Dalton." He yanked the rope and the girl cried out. Without thinking, Lara lunged forward and grabbed the rope. "I said let her go." For a second, the whole world went silent. Cutter stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief turning to rage. "You best let go," he snarled, "before you get hurt." "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be." He yanked the rope hard, pulling them both off balance. Then a voice, cold as a winter river, sliced through the tension. "That's enough, Cutter." Hayes Dalton was there, on his horse, watching from the edge of the crowd. He dismounted and walked toward them, the townspeople parting for him like he was royalty. He stopped in front of Lara, his gray eyes unreadable. "You have a talent for finding trouble, Miss Whitfield," he said quietly. "She's a child," Lara pleaded. "She's hurt." Dalton looked from Lara's defiant face to the bruised face of the native girl. He was silent for a long moment, and Lara felt like he was weighing her soul. "What do you propose?" he asked finally. "Let me take her. I'll be responsible for her." Cutter sputtered. "Boss, she's a thief. We caught her." Dalton ignored him. His gaze was locked on Lara. "You understand what that means? If she runs, if she steals again, it's on you." "I understand." He reached out and took the rope from Cutter, then handed it to Lara. Their fingers brushed. His hand was calloused and warm, and an electric jolt shot up her arm. "She's your problem now," he said. "I hope you know what you're doing." He turned and mounted his horse, riding away without another word. As Lara led the girl back to the trading post, she felt the eyes of the entire town on her. She had just publicly defied Hayes Dalton. Again. And she had taken on a burden that would surely bring more trouble. Inside, she cleaned the girl's wounds. Her name was Aita. When Lara asked her why she stole the food, the girl's story came out in broken English. "Little brother," Aita whispered, her eyes full of pain. So hungry. She had an 8-year-old brother, Dakota, hidden in the hills. Their parents were gone. She was all he had. This wasn't a crime of greed. It was an act of desperation. "Bring him here," Lara said, the words leaving her mouth before she could stop them. "Both of you. You can stay with me." Aita stared at her, suspicion warring with hope in her dark eyes. "Why you help?" It was a fair question. Lara was a stranger here, an enemy to the most powerful man in the county. Harboring 2 native children would make her a pariah. But she looked at this bruised, brave girl, and she saw a reflection of her own loneliness, her own fight to survive. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said. That night, with Aita and a silent, terrified Dakota asleep on her uncle's bed frame, Lara lay on the floor and stared into the darkness. She had been in Copper Ridge for less than 2 days, and she'd started a war, adopted a family, and made herself the most hated person in town. But as she listened to the children's quiet breathing, she felt something she hadn't felt since her father died. A sense of purpose. She didn't know that her simple act of kindness had just raised the stakes of the entire game. Aita hadn't just been stealing food. She and her brother had seen something on Dalton's ranch, something they weren't supposed to see. And now, the 2 most valuable witnesses in the secret war for Copper Ridge were sleeping under Lara's roof. Hayes Dalton didn't come back for a week. Lara spent the time turning the trading post into a home and a business. Aita, it turned out, was sharp with numbers, and Dakota, though still silent, worked with a fierce determination. The town watched them, some with contempt, others with a grudging curiosity. Then one evening, Dalton appeared, alone. He stood on her porch as the sun bled across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. "I came to see how you're managing," he said. His eyes flickered past her, into the clean, organized trading post. "And your house guests?" "They're fine," Lara said, her posture stiff. "I'm surprised they stayed," he mused. "Most people in your position would have turned them out once the pressure started." "Has someone been applying pressure, Mr. Dalton?" "Not yet," he said. "But they will. There are men in this town who don't appreciate your charity." He looked at her then, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. "You have strong opinions for someone who's been here less than a week." "The last week has only reinforced them." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're going to have a hard time here, Miss Whitfield. This country doesn't reward idealism. It rewards survival." "Is that how you built your ranch? By surviving?" His jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do." He looked out at the vast, empty prairie. "You remind me of someone I knew. She also believed principles mattered more than survival." "What happened to her?" Lara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dalton's eyes went dark. "She died," he said flatly. "The frontier doesn't care about principles." He settled his hat on his head. "The offer for your property still stands. When you change your mind, and you will, come find me." He rode off into the twilight, leaving Lara with a cold knot of dread in her stomach. Aita appeared in the doorway behind her. "Dangerous man," she said. "I know." "Not like others," Aita insisted, struggling for the words. "He see you. Not like town see. He see." Before Lara could ask what she meant, the night was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. Flames erupted from a building down the street, the saddle-maker's shop. The town exploded into a frenzy of buckets and shouting. Lara joined the bucket line, her body screaming with effort, but they were too late. The building was a total loss. The owner, a man named Jensen, stared at the smoking ruins, his face blank with shock. "Lamp fell over," he said to the crowd. "An accident." But as he said it, his eyes, and the eyes of half the town, flickered toward Laura. It was an accusation, silent and venomous. She was the bad luck. She was the cause. When she finally walked back to her trading post, exhausted and covered in soot, she found a knife stuck in her door. Pinned beneath the blade was a piece of paper. One word, scrawled in crude letters: leave. They were trying to scare her. And it was working. That night, she lay awake, the scent of smoke still thick in the air, and she thought about the woman Dalton knew, the one who died for her principles. She wondered if she was on the same path. But there was another thought that terrified her even more. The fire hadn't been random. The saddlemaker, Yenzen, had been one of the few men in town who had spoken out against Dalton. And now his life was in ruins. This wasn't just a threat against her. It was a message to the entire town. Defy Hayes Dalton and you will burn. The drought began as a whisper. A few cloudless days turned into a week, then a month. The prairie grass turned from green to gold to a brittle, dying brown. The creek that fed Copper Ridge shrank to a muddy trickle. And as the water disappeared, so did the town's civility. Tempers frayed. Fear turned to anger. Lara's business survived on a trickle of customers, but the open hostility was a constant weight. Then Cutter and two of Dalton's men walked in one afternoon. "Mr. Dalton has a new offer," Cutter sneered. "Given the conditions, he's willing to be generous." "My answer is the same," Lara said. Cutter's eyes went hard. "That's a mistake, a bad one. Accidents happen when folks get desperate." The threat was clear. That night, she found her water barrel on the porch fouled with kerosene. The last of her clean water, ruined. The message was unmistakable. We control what you need to live. A few days later, the unthinkable happened. Dakota vanished. Ayita was beside herself with grief and terror. They searched all morning, their calls swallowed by the vast, empty landscape. Just as Lara was beginning to lose all hope, a rider appeared on the horizon. It was Hayes Dalton, and slumped in the saddle in front of him was Dakota. Dalton reined in his horse, his face grim and dusted with trail dirt. "Found him 2 miles out," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Said he was going to find water for his sister." He lifted the small boy down into Ayita's waiting arms. Then he looked at Lara. "We need to talk, now." Inside the trading post, he paced like a caged wolf. "Lara," he said, using her first name for the first time. "This has to stop, this war between us." "You're the one fighting it," she shot back. "No," he said, stopping to face her. "I didn't foul your water. I didn't threaten that boy. But there are men who think they're helping me by making your life hell, and you're in danger because of it. So I should just give you what you want?" "No," he said, his voice dropping. "We find a compromise." He explained his idea. A lease. She would keep the trading post, but he would pay her for legal access to cross her land. It was a lifeline, a way out. "Why?" she asked, suspicious. "Why help me now?" He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the armor crack. She saw the weary man beneath the ruthless rancher. "Because I don't want to break you," he said, his voice raw. "I came out here to build something, but watching you stand by what you believe in, no matter the cost. You remind me of the man I wanted to be, before I learned what it takes to survive out here." The confession hung in the air between them. It was more than a business offer. It was an olive branch. It was a plea. Before she could answer, a rock smashed against the outside wall, then another. They looked out the window. A mob was forming in the street. A local rancher named Weber was at the center of it, his face twisted with rage. "Dalton's hoarding water," he screamed. "And that woman, with her Indians, she brought this curse on us." The crowd's anger, fueled by drought and fear, turned on the trading post. They began to move forward, their faces ugly, "Leave!" someone shouted. A rock shattered the front window. This was it. This was how it ended. Then a gunshot ripped through the air. Hayes Dalton stood on the porch, his pistol in his hand, his face a mask of cold fury. "That's enough!" he roared. The force of his presence, the sheer power of his reputation, stopped the mob in its tracks. "Go home, all of you. She has done nothing wrong. She is protecting children. If that offends you, you need to look hard at who you've become." The crowd melted away, shamed into silence. Hayes turned to her, his eyes blazing. "Now do you see? They'll tear you apart. Accept my offer, Lara. Let me protect you." "Like you protect your property?" she asked, her pride warring with her fear. "Like I protect someone I—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm not a good man, Lara. I've done things. Terrible things to get where I am. The man who owned my ranch before me. I didn't run him off. He was my partner. And I betrayed him. I left him for dead in the desert to take it all." The ugly confession spilled out of him, raw and painful. "But you make me want to be better, to be a man who deserves anything good." He stepped closer. "Please, this isn't about land anymore." Lara stared at him, at this complex, broken man who was offering her both a lifeline and a burden. She saw the truth of his past in his eyes, but she also saw a desperate hope for a different future. "I accept," she whispered, "on one condition. Aita and Dakota stay. Always." "Agreed," he said, relief flooding his face. "And this is a business arrangement," she added, trying to rebuild the wall around her heart. "Nothing more." He moved so close she could feel the heat of his body. "Is that what you really want?" he murmured. Before she could lie, the door burst open. It was Cutter, his face white with panic. "Boss, the creek, it's gone. It's been dammed up, and Weber is saying you did it. He's gathering men. And guns." Dalton swore, the brief moment of peace shattered. "I have to go," he said to Lara, his eyes full of a grim promise. "This isn't over." He ran out, leaving Lara alone in the trading post, the threat of a range war hanging over them like a shroud. The sabotage was an escalation, a brilliant, deadly move. Someone had framed Dalton perfectly, pushing the entire valley to the brink of a bloody conflict, and Lara suddenly realized the terrifying truth. The enemy wasn't the drought, it wasn't the town, it wasn't even Hayes Dalton. It was someone else entirely, someone who had been pulling the strings all along. The rain came 3 days later, a furious, cleansing torrent that turned the dusty streets to mud. As the storm raged, Hayes appeared on her porch, soaked to the skin. He had stopped the war. He had taken Weber and the others upstream and shown them the crude, temporary dam, clearly not his own work. He had proven his innocence, but the real saboteur was still out there. He stood before her, water dripping from the brim of his hat. "I have a confession," he said, his voice low and serious over the drumming of the rain. "I never just wanted the land. I wanted an excuse to talk to you, an excuse to be near you." He stepped forward, cupping her face in his hands. His touch was gentle, questioning. "Every time you stood up to me, every time you refused to break, I think I fell a little more in love with you." He lowered his head and kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of rain and desperation, and a fragile, dangerous hope. When they broke apart, they were both breathless. "This complicates things," she whispered. "Good," he said, a smile transforming his rugged face. "I'm learning to like complicated." They forged a new alliance that day, one built on more than just a lease agreement. The search for the saboteur began, and the first clue came from the most unlikely source. Dakota. The silent little boy finally spoke. He told them, in halting whispers, what he and Aida had seen the day she was caught on Dalton's ranch. They hadn't been near the cookhouse. They had been hiding in the trees near an old, abandoned line shack. And they had seen 2 men meeting there in secret. One was Cutter, Dalton's own foreman. The other was Barnaby, the friendly owner of the general store. The betrayal hit Lara like a physical blow. Barnaby, who had sold her supplies, who had watched the mob gather with neutral eyes. He was the puppet master. But who was pulling his strings? The answer lay in the one place no one had thought to look. Her uncle's last letter. That night Lara held the simple, curt letter over the flame of a lamp. As the paper warmed, new words began to appear, written between the lines in invisible ink made from lemon juice. It was a second letter, a secret message. Her uncle's true last will and testament. The story he told made her blood run cold. He hadn't been a simple trader. He and Dalton's former partner had discovered a massive silver vein running directly beneath the trading post and the adjoining land. They had agreed to work it together, but a powerful mining conglomerate from back east found out. They sent an agent to Copper Ridge to acquire the land by any means necessary. That agent was Barnaby. Barnaby had played them against each other. He murdered Dalton's partner and made it look like Hayes had betrayed him. He poisoned Thomas Whitfield slowly, making it look like pneumonia. He had orchestrated everything. The fire, the sabotage, the mob. All to drive the price of the land down, or to force Lara and Dalton to destroy each other so he could pick up the pieces for his corporate masters. And Cutter had been his man on the inside all along. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was never about cattle. It was about a fortune in silver hiding just beneath their feet. And Barnaby was about to make his final move. The letter ended with a desperate plea from her uncle. Trust Dalton. He is not the man they say he is. Your principles, Lara. They are the only thing that can expose the truth. Don't let the wolves win. Armed with the truth, Lara and Hayes laid a trap. The next day, Hayes rode out to the abandoned line shack, letting Cutter know he'd be there alone. He was the bait. Lara, meanwhile, went to the general store. She walked in, holding the letter. "It's over, Barnaby," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I know everything." Barnaby's friendly mask dropped away, revealing the cold-eyed killer beneath. He lunged for the shotgun he kept under the counter. But as he did, Margaret Hensley stepped out from the back room, leveling an old buffalo rifle at his chest. The townspeople, the ones who had formed the mob, the ones who had thrown rocks, filed in behind her. They had heard the truth, and they were ready to stand for justice. Out at the line shack, Cutter pulled his gun on Hayes. "It's a shame, boss," he sneered. "All this for a patch of dirt." "It was never about the dirt, was it, Cutter?" Hayes said, his voice dangerously calm. Just as Cutter was about to fire, an arrow hissed out of the trees and buried itself in his shoulder. He screamed, dropping his gun. Aida stepped out of the shadows, another arrow notched in her bow, her face a mask of fierce determination. It was over. The conspiracy was broken, the lies exposed. Barnaby and Cutter were handed over to the law, and the story of the hidden silver became the legend of Copper Ridge. But Lara and Hayes knew the real treasure wasn't the silver in the ground. It was the trust they had built, the future they had forged in the crucible of fire and drought. They had come together as enemies, two stubborn souls battling for survival. But they had found something more. A partnership, a home, a love as rugged and resilient as the land itself. They had reminded a town, and each other, that even on the harshest frontier, the most valuable thing you can own is your integrity. If you enjoyed this story of hidden secrets and frontier justice, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Because out here in the wild heart of the world, there are always more stories buried just beneath the surface, waiting for the storm to wash away the dust and reveal the truth.